Okay, so it paused in this section. I'm going to add it to this next section. You can't have. I'm going to explain this, and I'm going to put this on because I'm not. This is just me. This is me being serious. As a person that understands a lot of these rules, I do this thing for Yahusha, which has to do with Jesus and his Father, Yahweh Shaddai, in memory and as respect. You can't have a government entity, meaning you can't have a government, which is government entity, which means you can't have a federal government agency go to a State Department agency without Department of Justice and Department of Defense's authorization. And it also has to do with the Department of Treasury as well. Let me repeat that. You can't change rules and regulations on constitutional laws without the permission of Department of Justice and Department of Defense, because that is their jurisdiction. So when the president says, I'm going to just do things, for example, and I'm going to change Department of Education state-wise, because as a person that understands emergency medical technician and etc., and a person that understands the healthcare professional field, and I've studied it for a very long time, and I got licensed and operated, as a person that understands that, in which I went and took the exam, which has to do with this U.S. MLE, which has to do with the medical exam, which has to do with a lot of this stuff. You can't just pass things without their permission. You just can't do that. You have to get their permission to do that exam. The United States Medical Licensing Exam. And it's even on the bar exam as well. You can't do anything without their permission. A president of the United States cannot do it without Department of Justice or Department of Defense's permission, because it has to do with the federal government. State entities and federal government entities have to be separate. This is the reason why I'm doing this video to begin with, because a lot of my professors, they would have probably said something similar to what I'm saying. You have to leave the Department of Education alone. You cannot mess around with it, because it's like opening up Pandora's box. You have to be very, very careful, because those positions are very, very important. And it has to stay a federal entity, because if you make it a state entity, then you're going to have to transition all those government jobs. It's not just that job. That job affects a lot of these other jobs to begin with, because when you're in undergraduate school and when you're in graduate school for accounting and financing, or you study to become an economics person, or an economics major, you want to become a professor, etc., or an analyst, they've explained this like numerous times, where you have to get permission from each of these entities to begin with. State and federal have to be separate. It's just like the thing in constitutional law where church and government has to be separate. You can't have separate entities. The reason why I'm bringing this matter up to begin with is it has to do with United Kingdom, and it has to do with the Vatican. You have a Social Security card, which is a social debt. That debt is in the Vatican. It's considered to be a debt with the Vatican. The reason why I'm bringing this all together to begin with is you cannot have any foreign entity owning our country. Just like the same thing is where Social Security cannot have a debt on a debt. You can't have a debt on a debt. It's considered double taxation without representation. You have the founding fathers which have explained this numerous amount of times. So, this is what I'm trying to explain to a lot of these agencies. He cannot just change rules. He has to follow constitutional rules. There are rules and regulations to all of these entities to begin with. If he starts, and I'm going to explain this, if he starts saying the State Department, I'm going to make them all State Department, then you're not going to have Langley, Virginia to begin with, because that is considered part of that entity, and it's considered unconstitutional. This is the reason why I'm re-explaining this numerous amount of times, because those agencies, those federal government agencies, relies on Department of Education, because you have to have certain degrees and certain licenses in order to be considered an employee of the federal government. This is certain things that you need to understand. You can't pass anything without their permit. Another thing too is Congress and Senate has to have you can't just make a rule and say we're going to go State Department without Congress and Senate's position as well, because they have an overruling as well, besides the Justice Department. Their committee handles a lot of that stuff with Department of Education, because they don't want certain things to be foul play, as they say. So I just want to explain this to you guys so you're at least aware. Thank you. Have a good day.